Listen to me very carefully, because on May 18th, 2026, something happened on the Zaporizhia front that the surface-level war coverage is not explaining to you with the depth and precision it demands. And if you do not understand what it means, you are watching this war with a blindfold on. Ukraine just closed the gate, not metaphorically, not as a talking point. Operationally, physically, and strategically, Ukraine cleared and controlled the single town that served as the launch pad, the staging area, and the highway junction for Putin's entire southern military strategy. And in doing so, stranded 65,000 Russian soldiers, VDV airborne divisions, Pacific Fleet Marines, Spetsnaz battalions, combined arms, army elements on the wrong side of a door that is not opening again. 7 months, Putin's most elite military formations, his most prestigious units, his decisive blow strategy for Zaporizhia, all of it just collapsed in a coordinated clearance operation by Ukraine's Artan Special Unit in a small town called Stepnokirsk. The numbers do not lie. 65,000 soldiers are stranded. This changes everything. This channel delivers the complete, unfiltered, analytically rigorous strategic picture of what is actually happening in this war. Not the simplified territorial update, not the politically motivated framing from either side, but the operational and strategic depth that tells you what these developments genuinely mean for how this conflict resolves. I am giving that intelligence to you completely free. The only price is a subscription and your commitment to following this war at the level of analytical seriousness it deserves. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the strategic consequences of what just happened in Stepnokirsk are going to unfold over the coming weeks and months, and you need the complete picture to understand them when they arrive. Let me start with what Stepnokirsk actually is and why its capture represents a strategic development that goes far beyond the physical dimensions of a small settlement in southern Ukraine, because the geographic and operational significance of this specific location is the entire story, and the vast majority of coverage will miss it entirely. Stepnokirsk sits approximately 30 kilometers south of Zaporizhia city. In purely physical terms, population, infrastructure, size, it is an unremarkable place on an open landscape. But on the operational map of this conflict, it occupies one of the most consequential geographic positions in the entire southern theater of war. It is a critical junction on the E105 highway, minus the major north-south arterial route that stretches from northern Europe through Moscow all the way down to Crimea. No other highway south of Zaporizhia is as wide, as capable of sustaining heavy military transport loads, or as fast for moving the convoys, the ammunition resupply columns, the reinforcement movements, and the logistics chains that keep a military force of 65,000 soldiers operational in a contested combat zone. Whatever Russia is transporting from Crimea into the Ukrainian interior, whatever convoy it sends in whatever direction, it eventually uses some portion of this route. Control of Stepnokirsk meant control of the entire north-south operational axis south of Zaporizhia, beyond the highway significance. The town contains something genuinely rare in the open landscape of southern Ukraine. Concrete buildings, urban terrain with durable structures, creates the kind of defensive anchor that transforms a small settlement into a force multiplier, the same way Vuhledar served as a tactical anchor on other sections of the front. That dual significance, highway control plus urban defensive potential, is precisely why Putin had been pouring his most prestigious military formations into the effort to take this town for 7 consecutive months, from November 2025 through May 2026. The 299th Airborne Regiment attached to the 98th VDV Division, reserve forces from the 7th Air Assault Division, rushed from Kursk to this region in March and April. The Kremlin chose to reinforce the Zaporizhia line at the direct expense of its main offensive in Pokrovsk, a strategic trade that tells you exactly how much importance Moscow placed on Stepnokirsk as the key to unlocking Zaporizhia. And on May 18th, Ukraine's Artan Special Unit, affiliated with Ukrainian military intelligence, entered that town in a BRAC, coordinated operation with neighboring defense units, conducted house-to-house clearance with every building checked for traps and remaining enemy personnel, and brought Stepnokirsk under Ukrainian control. Geolocated footage released by Ukrainian military intelligence showed Ukrainian armored vehicles advancing to the town's center from the E105 highway intersection, an area that independent battlefield monitoring had previously assessed as under Russian control. The gate is closed. The 65,000 Russian soldiers who were supposed to use Stepnokirsk as their decisive blow launch pad are now stranded on the wrong side of it. Now, let me give you the single number that tells you everything you need to know about what 7 months of Russian elite force commitment to this objective actually produced. Because this data point exposes the complete operational failure of Russia's Zaporizhzhia strategy with a precision that no territorial map can match. The average survival time for a mobilized Russian soldier in Stepnokirsk dropped to 12 minutes. 12 minutes from reaching the front line to becoming a casualty. That is the documented average operational reality that Ukraine's integrated drone and artillery system produced against Russian attacking forces across 7 months of sustained offensive operations in this specific theater. Behind that 12-minute figure is Ukraine's FPV drone ecosystem, small, explosive-laden aircraft that target individual soldiers with a precision and persistence that makes traditional infantry advanced tactics functionally suicidal in the kill zones they create. The latest generation of autonomous drones operating via fiber optic cables cannot be jammed by electronic warfare systems and are reportedly undetectable until the moment of impact, removing the last countermeasure that Russian infantry could theoretically employ to survive the approach to forward positions. The director of a Russian drone development facility wrote explicitly in early April that Russia has lost its technological lead over the past 6 months, and that 90% of Russian losses occur in the last mile of logistics, the critical zone where supplies and personnel must move from staging areas to forward combat positions. Ukraine did not mass large conventional units to defend Stepnokirsk against Russia's elite formations. Instead, it systematically applied the same cycle to every Russian infiltration attempt. Drones detected them, artillery suppressed them, an assault group cleared them out. The position was reinforced. Every time Russia sent in small infiltration teams of 5 to 10 soldiers to use basements as nighttime firing positions, the cycle repeated with the same outcome. Russia's VDV airborne troops are the face of Russian military recruitment posters. They march in Victory Day parades. They carry the institutional prestige of Russia's most capable and celebrated military formations. In Stepnokirsk, that institutional prestige was ground down to a 12-minute survival window. Russian military bloggers were writing publicly about this as a confrontation with the elite unit myth, asking openly, if the VDV cannot take a small town after 7 months of prioritized effort, who in the Russian military order of battle can? That question challenges not just the military narrative, but the entire Kremlin war narrative, built on the promise of inevitable Russian military superiority. Monthly Russian losses exceed 35,000 soldiers, while new recruitment delivers only 27,000, a monthly deficit of 8,000 fighters that compounds relentlessly with every additional week of operations. At this tempo, the numbers do not lie. Russia is losing this arithmetic race, and Stepnokirsk proved it in the most documented and irreversible way possible. Now I need to explain the operational trap in specific, concrete terms. Because 65,000 stranded Russian soldiers is a phrase that requires precise translation into the tactical and political reality those soldiers are now living. Inside, to be fully understood, classical military theory defines an operational trap as a position from which a force can neither advance effectively, remain safely, nor withdraw without catastrophic consequence, a three-direction impossibility. That produces the grinding attrition of a force that has permanently lost the initiative. That is the documented situation for Russian forces on the Zaporizhzhia front, following the loss of Stepnokirsk. And each direction of the impossibility deserves specific examination. They cannot advance. Stepnokirsk is under Ukrainian control. The E-105 staging area is eliminated. Ukrainian fire control has expanded across the southern axis. The drone kill zone, extending approximately 20 kilometers from the front line, is deepening. And since Russia is the attacking force, it must constantly move troops, ammunition, and equipment forward through that zone, a logistical requirement that Ukraine's drone ecosystem converts into a casualty generation operation with every convoy movement and every troop rotation. The 12-minute survival window is not a historical statistic. It is the current operational reality that any renewed advance must be conducted inside. They cannot remain safely. Static positioning in a contested kill zone means passive attrition without territorial gain. Ukraine's medium-range drone strikes are maintaining constant pressure on Russian supply lines behind the front. The flow of ammunition and fuel is documented as slowing, Resources are dwindling. Every day of holding current positions burns through personnel and material while achieving nothing operationally. A consumption equation that runs in only one direction, and they cannot withdraw. And this is the dimension that makes the trap genuinely inescapable rather than merely militarily difficult. Putin has publicly declared the Zaporizhia region as Russian territory through his formal annexation declarations. Withdrawing Russian military forces from declared Russian territory is not a military option that the Kremlin can authorize. Without simultaneously destroying the foundational narrative justification for 4 years of war, the entire information architecture built to sustain domestic support for the conflict, and the personal political credibility that Putin has staked on the outcome, the political cost of visible withdrawal from annexed territory exceeds what the Kremlin's information control apparatus can absorb without triggering the kind of domestic legitimacy crisis that every aspect of Russian state media management has been engineered to prevent. Stop being a victim of the simplified narrative that this is just about one town changing hands. 65,000 soldiers caught between tactical impossibility, logistical deterioration, and political prohibition on retreat. That is the definition of stranded. And Ukraine built that situation deliberately and patiently over 7 months. Now let me explain why the strategic significance of Stepnokirsk extends far beyond the Zaporizhia front and reaches all the way to Crimea. Because the geographic position of this town at the northern end of the corridor leading to the peninsula means its capture creates a compounding strategic effect that goes to the heart of Russia's entire southern position. Russia's land bridge to Crimea, the M14 corridor stretching from Mariupol to Melitopol, converges with the E105 highway that runs through Stepnokirsk. These two arterial routes form the interconnected spine of Russia's entire southern logistics architecture, feeding Crimea's military garrison, moving forces between the peninsula and the occupied mainland, and sustaining the supply chain that makes Russian military presence in the south operationally viable. When Stepnokirsk fell and the E105 junction came under Ukrainian control, the entire supply chain heading south was disrupted. Russian forces moving between the mainland and Crimea lost a critical staging and transit point. Ukrainian drone attack angles on the roads to Crimea expanded. Ukraine had already been bringing sections of the M14 highway under drone-controlled fire before Stepnokirsk fell. The capture is intensifying that pressure by extending Ukrainian fire control further along the north-south supply axis toward the peninsula. The three-phase model that retired U.S. General Ben Hodges has been advocating throughout this conflict, first isolation, then making the position unbearable, then liberation, is built precisely on this compounding logic. Every Ukrainian operational success that tightens the logistical constraints on Crimea by another increment deepens the strategic dilemma facing Russian forces defending the peninsula and the entire occupied south. Crimea is not a self-sustaining military position. It requires constant resupply through the land corridor that Russia seized in 2022, and specifically to solve the logistical vulnerability that made the peninsula militarily precarious after its 2014 annexation. Degrading that corridor does not immediately collapse Russia's Crimea position, but it degrades it in the same systematic, compounding way that the Stepnokirsk attrition degraded Russia's Zaporizhia. Offensive incrementally, relentlessly, and in a direction that cannot be reversed without the kind of operational breakthrough that 12-minute survival windows make increasingly theoretical. The Economist's May 17th analysis confirmed the broader territorial shift with specific documented figures. Since January 2026, Ukraine has recaptured approximately 65 square kilometers in the Zaporizhia direction alone, with broader operations accounting for over 400 square kilometers. Russia is experiencing sustained territorial losses for the first time since October 2023. Russia captured approximately 220 square kilometers in all of 2026, just 0.04% of Ukrainian territory, while Ukraine's 30-day moving average shows approximately 189 square kilometers recaptured. Lawrence Friedman of King's College London described the situation as feeling like a turning point, with the potential for broader Russian collapse in certain sectors. The numbers do not lie. Russia is spending more resources every day in this war and getting demonstrably less in return with every passing month. Now let me lay out Putin's actual options following the loss of Stepnokirsk with the analytical honesty that the strategic situation demands. Because understanding specifically why each available path is bad is what tells you whether this is a genuine inflection point or a temporary setback that Russian resources can absorb. Continuing the direct ground assault towards Zaporizhia is catastrophically more costly and operationally difficult, with the staging infrastructure gone, the highway junction under Ukrainian control, and the drone kill zone expanded. 7 months of prioritized elite force commitment produced zero territorial gain and documented unit decimation, 12-minute survival windows, more of the same approach, with reduced infrastructure and expanded Ukrainian fire control, produces worse outcomes, not better ones. Shifting forces to weaker Ukrainian lines elsewhere trades the Zaporizhia problem for a different problem, weakening current positions that Ukraine would immediately exploit while applying pressure elsewhere on a front that is already stretched across both sides, intensified long-range fire with guided bombs. S-300 missiles and Lancet drones destroys Ukrainian cities and infrastructure but does not gain territory. It is the option Russia employs when it wants to impose costs without achieving operational objectives. And while it produces genuine civilian suffering, it does not change the ground equation. New mobilization is political suicide. The 2022 partial mobilization produced mass exodus and protests that genuinely alarmed the Kremlin about domestic stability. A new mobilization declaration in 2026 with 12-minute survival times going viral on Telegram and casualty figures between 280,000 and 518,000 dead. Total losses, including wounded, reaching 1.5 million. Approximately 3% of Russia's pre-war male military-age population would be domestically catastrophic, beyond what the state media apparatus can manage. Nuclear escalation has been brandished as a threat for 4 years without being acted upon, and with every empty final warning, Putin's credibility on this option erodes further, while the strategic, operational, and diplomatic constraints on use remain unchanged. Diplomacy packaged as victory is the option that a leaked Kremlin document suggests Putin's inner circle is actually working on, but the equation of withdrawing from declared annexed territory, admitting elite unit decimation, and presenting that outcome as a strategic success becomes harder to construct with every additional operational failure that compounds the credibility deficit. The Ukraine Support Act and the U.S. House of Representatives reaching its 218 signature threshold and heading toward a June vote with over $1 billion in direct aid and comprehensive new sanctions on the table, is tightening the external financial and military supply constraint simultaneously with the internal military constraint that Stepnokirsk has created. Cash is trash when the system burning through it is achieving nothing with the expenditure. Russia is losing 470 soldiers per square kilometer of territory gained in Donetsk. That is the exchange rate of Russian military capacity for territorial outcome in 2026, and it is an exchange rate that the mathematics of Russian demographics, recruitment, and industrial production cannot sustain indefinitely. Let me close with a complete picture assembled and the direct question it demands of everyone paying serious attention to this conflict. 65,000 Russian soldiers are stranded on the Zaporizhia front. The town that was the key to Putin's decisive blow strategy has been cleared and controlled by Ukraine. The E-105 highway junction that fed the entire southern logistics chain has been disrupted. The average survival time for Russian soldiers attacking this front is 12 minutes. Russia is losing 35,000 soldiers per month while recruiting 27,000. The BDD, Russia's most prestigious military formation, attacked one small settlement for 7 months and failed. The Crimea land corridor is under increasing Ukrainian drone pressure. Putin's 6 available options are all analytically bad in specific documented ways, and the Kremlin's inner circle is reportedly working on how to package eventual withdrawal from declared annexed territory as a victory. The numbers do not lie. So I am asking you directly right now, are you going to be a winner who understands the complete operational and strategic picture of what just happened on the Zaporizhia front, who follows this war with the analytical rigor that the most consequential conflict of this generation deserves, and who stays ahead of the strategic developments that are reshaping the outcome? Or are you going to be a loser who catches the headline that Ukraine took a small town and misses the 65,000 stranded soldiers? the disrupted Crimea supply chain, and the operational trap that has no exit. Stop being a victim of surface-level war coverage. Ukraine closed the gate. The soldiers on the wrong side of it are not going anywhere. Subscribe now, share this. The numbers are running and they tell only one story.